Welcome back to Self-Love Ignited. Today on the podcast, I am interviewing Sarah Mayland. Now, I love Sarah's story. She is the owner of Inside Out Transformations, where she is on a mission to empower women. And what she does is she works on women's self-love, right? So that it starts from the inside out. She is a certified personal trainer. She is also a nutrition specialist, and she has a background in clinical mental health counseling. So Sarah is coming at this from a really beautiful, holistic perspective. She also, of course, has a deeply personal connection to the work that she does. And she comes on to talk about how she never used to feel like she was good enough. There was always a lack. And then when she had her son and her body changed, she really had to step her game up. So she tells us all about that. We have some great conversations. I cannot wait for you to meet Sarah. My name is Katie Allen, and this is Self-Love Ignited. Let's get to it. Welcome back to Self-Love Ignited. Today on the podcast, I am interviewing Sarah Mayland. Sarah, I'm really excited to have you here, and I cannot wait to hear your story and more about you and what you do and all that. So why don't you just take a moment and introduce yourself to everybody?
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me on. I am so pumped to be here. Yes, my name is Sarah Mayland. I am the owner of Inside Out Transformations, which is a business that helps women learn how to love themselves and their bodies and provides a lot of great educational resources. I am the mom of a fabulous 6-year-old boy with autism. I love to sing. I love to cook for other people, not for myself. I love, what else do I love? I love music. I love exercise. Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I'm really happy that we're here. And I think I want to touch on, and I think we'll sort of get to this, but when when we first connected, I was like, oh, I'm not sure if we're a good fit. I'm not sure if we are. And I mean, obviously we are, because we're here, because we decided to, we decided to record this. But, there's a lot of nuances in the work that you do. And, we touched on that sort of last time when we chatted a little bit. So I'm sure we will get there at some point today during this call. But, I want to start with your story, because your story is sort of the foundation on which all of this is based, right? And, this podcast is all about telling stories of women, of people just like you, who have come from a place of not liking parts of themselves, not loving parts of themselves, and really sort of telling the story of that journey to self-love, to self-acceptance in whatever way that looks like for you. So, Sarah, why don't you tell us your story? Like, take us back to the beginning. Where did your challenges begin?
Sure. So I was actually thinking a lot about this since the last time we talked, and I think like want to take this back to childhood. So I grew up in a household with an abusive father. He was emotionally and physically abusive. He was an alcoholic, and I was a naturally very shy and risk averse, cautious child. And so I kind of grew up with this mindset of saying no to myself before I even asked the question, right? So if there was something I wanted to do, I would just be like, oh, no, I can't do that. And I think that really came from fear of just, not knowing what was going to trigger my dad. And, all through my childhood, as I was growing up, I was very, very sensitive to criticism. And I remember the first kind of revelation I had that really, I think, was a major defining step in my self-care journey was when I was in high school and I was taking flute lessons. And every time my teacher gave me a compliment, I would just be like, oh, yeah, kind of poo-poo it. And she looked at me one day and she said, Sarah, it is okay to say that you did a good job. And that thought had never occurred to me before, because I think this belief that I had been carrying around was, well, if you're like, yes, I did a great job, then you're arrogant, or you're not humble, or you're not modest enough. And, so I had this limitation on myself that I cannot acknowledge that I've done a good job. And my flute teacher, in that one sentence, just completely shattered that, which was amazing. And she was also the first person to teach me how to handle compliments, which is that when someone pays you a compliment, you say thank you. I learned that from her. And I feel like because of her, I was really able in high school to kind of like blossom into myself a little more and just be who I was. Um, my path through college was a little rocky. I had a really tough experience learning what seasonal depression was for the first time. And so it took me a while to get through college. And I think that my next major step in my self care journey came right before I was going to start my master's program in counseling. And so what happened was I was married at the time. Um, and I had spent all of this time, I was finishing up my bachelor's in psych. I really wanted to do a doctoral program in neuropsychology. Um, and because I had done my degree online, I couldn't like build relationships enough with my professors or work in their labs or do anything like that you need when you're applying for doctoral programs. And so, I met with one of the professors, and she said, yes, you did amazing work, but I would really recommend doing a master's program. And, that was kind of a bit of a disappointment and a little bit of a hit. I don't think I had the sense of self at the time to not take that as I'm not good enough kind of thing. Of course, hindsight is 2020, and I can see that's not the issue now. But at the time, it hit hard. It triggered a lot of shame for me. And then also within like a 2-week period, literally like maybe a month before I started my master's program, I um, lost my husband. He just one day was like, I am leaving. And this is what I need to do. And, and again, it was very much like, oh my God, what is wrong with me? Like, what did I do wrong? And I also lost the job. And so it really triggered a lot of the I'm not good enough narrative, that very limiting narrative. And after that, for quite a long time, I became really, really scared of asserting myself or putting myself forward because I was knocked down a lot. I had a really hard time bouncing back from that. And my master's program was a slog. I got remarried and was actually pregnant with my son when I graduated from my master's program. And when I was pregnant, I had gained 60 pounds carrying my son. And so after having him, I started, you know, I started going to like this mom's exercise group because I was like, I know if I don't, I'm going to get depressed. Number one. And number two, I gained 60 pounds. And I was feeling a lot of shame around my body with that. And yes, I could say to myself, oh my God, I grew a human. My body is capable of amazing things. But it really felt like it wasn't my body anymore, right? It was like this vessel that was used to grow this person, to keep this person alive. And I felt like it wasn't really my body anymore, and I certainly didn't love how it looked. So, and that still combined with my kind of limiting ideas from my childhood and all of this shame wrapped up and I'm not good enough. And one of my girlfriends decided she was going to be an instructor for this mom's fitness group. And I was like, you can do that? Um, and I approached the owner of the franchise and I said, I'm interested, because I did have, a decent amount of fitness knowledge and a lot of body awareness. And I was like, do I have to be in better shape? And because I was very sensitive about my body, and they were like, absolutely not. Like, you are perfect as you are, and you are certainly capable of teaching as you are, which was such a needed and welcoming message. And so I became an instructor. And I think that that act of becoming an instructor was the kind of the next major step on my self-love journey, because I had to be in front of people with my body the way it was. Like, I had no choice. Right. And so I remember when I first started teaching, I was wearing like a lot of baggy clothes and like a lot of loose, flowy things. And after a while, I was like, I can't move in this stuff. Like, I can't work out in this stuff. And so I just wore like leggings, I wore tank tops. I just wore like normal workout clothes that showed my body. And for a long time, I was looking at myself and very aware of the flaws. And gradually, I think just from getting used to being in front of people, the way my body was looking, I just came to accept it. It didn't, the way my body looked didn't change my ability to instruct. The way my body looked did not take away from the difference that I was making. And frankly, the women in my class were all going through the same thing and no one cared. Right? Like, no one was up there like looking at me in front of the room being like, oh, she has a role. Um, it was really me worrying about my body. And so, it wasn't like this flash of lightning where I go from like hating my body to magically, oh, I love it. But it was, and I'm still not there 100%. Like, there are a lot of days I love my body, but there are some times where still I'm like, okay, that's where I'm at today. Um, and yeah, so I think it kind of, shifted very gradually from this not liking what I saw in the mirror to accepting what I saw in the mirror, and, kind of being body neutral, I want to say, which is, I think, where I kind of operate most of the time. Is not like I'm looking at myself hating my body. I'm not looking at myself being like, oh my God, gorgeous, here you are. It's my body. It's there. It does awesome stuff. I love it. But I don't necessarily like get wrapped up in feelings about it one way or the other on
Mhm.
day-to-day basis when I look at myself. And so, that was a pivotal step for me, was just having to get used to my body the way it was being in front of people. And, over time I shifted from um accepting my body to really appreciating my body, because I eventually expanded what I was doing in group fitness. I got more certifications, I started teaching in a lot more places, and I was doing a really demanding schedule where I was teaching like 16 classes a week in various places. And I was just like, I'm strong, like, I'm good at what I do. Like, my body is doing really cool stuff for me. And so it went from hate to acceptance to appreciation. And I think the last journey, or the last step most recently on my journey, not the last step altogether, just the most recent step, was when I was in therapy. Um, I had worked with a few therapists over the years, and the last therapist that I worked with was amazing. And what I really loved about him was that he gave homework. Like, he actually gave me stuff to actively work on. And one of the things that he did was this exercise, which he called, it's like this head of household exercise. And I won't get into it, but basically what you do is you have all of these unpleasant emotions that are like your inner children, and then your head of household is this loving parent. And so basically what you do is, whenever you're feeling crappy, whenever you're feeling something unpleasant, you pull back and you look at what you're feeling and you kind of give those inner children a voice, so shame is one of the inner children. And so, what would that shame say? And then you come in as head of household and you talk to shame or hurt or fear or whatever as a loving parent would. And what I learned from that, which was so pivotal for me, was that loving yourself means loving all of the parts of you, even the ones that you don't necessarily want to experience, right? Like, it seems counterintuitive to be like, yes, I love my shame or I love my fear, but all of those are parts of us. And when we spend our time and our energy trying to push those feelings away or trying to hide from them, essentially the message we're giving to ourselves is you're not allowed to feel those things. Those parts of you are invalid.
Mm-hmm.
And so by giving them voice and then by taking care of them, right, not only do you lessen the impact and the power of that emotion, but you also are literally loving yourself.
Yeah.
All of these parts of yourself. And so that was huge for me. That is something that I still practice to this day. It's something that I teach my clients. So, that was like the last kind of major shift that I've experienced in my journey so far.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to continue on this journey. I think it's something constant, right? I mean, like I said earlier, we don't arrive at a place where it's like, oh, I'm done.
Yeah.
I love myself. I'm good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a constant, not, I don't want to say constant struggle, but it's a constant intentional decision.
Yeah.
Right. And the way I think about it is, my 6-year-old, right? I love my 6-year-old so much. There are sometimes he's a little asshole. And I don't have, in those moments, right? I don't have the warm fuzzies for him,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean I stop loving him. And it doesn't mean that I stop doing what I need to do as a mother to take care for him, to take care of him. And I think it's the same for me. Like there are some times where I'm not having the warm fuzzies for myself, but it doesn't mean that I stop taking care of myself or stop loving myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I love so many parts of your story, but I mean that especially like what you just said at the end there, like that to me is love. Like love is unconditional, which means you can be an asshole and you still deserve love. It means that
Yeah.
you can have a night where you maybe if you like are a binge eater and then you feel a lot of
Hmm.
shame about that, you can have that and you can still find love for yourself, right? Like love is not conditional on you being perfect, on you being flawless, and that's another whole conversation because I don't think that even exists, because I
Yeah.
don't think that we even are flawed. Like I think that that's a whole thing. But you
Perfectly imperfect.
right, exactly, but it's like that is love, that's
Yeah.
love is not conditional. And the other big thing that you said, which I just love, is talking about the different parts of you. And I think we were talking about, um before we started recording the last time we chatted, about how sometimes people will have these parts of themselves and they're like, I just want to rip it out, I just want this part of me to be gone, I wish I didn't have
Hmm.
this, I wish I didn't have this shame or this guilt or this part of me that is sabotaging or this whatever, right? Like that's, I think, a really common thing that I hear, and I know that I'm sure in your own way you
Hmm.
hear as well from people. And it's like, but when you have that scope of seeing all of these parts of you, and when you can take a step back even further and say, what is the positive intention that this part has, right? This part is feeling shame
Yes.
because it wants X for me. This part is feeling fear because it is trying to keep me safe. This part is feeling
Yeah.
is this, it has I firmly believe every single part of us, no matter what it looks like on the surface, has a beautiful intention underneath. And when you can connect to the intention of your parts, holy game changer.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I absolutely. And I think, that's one of the things that I work on is, okay, we have these unpleasant emotions. What is their function?
Yes.
Right? I mean, if they weren't serving us in some sort of way, we would not be turning to them.
Mhm.
Right. And so when, and it could be, I think the example that we had talked about was a client of mine who was constantly procrastinating and then
Yes.
rushing to do everything at the end. And what she had learned, over the years was that if she did that, like, she was able to get stuff done, and it worked for her, and just because something has worked before doesn't necessarily mean it's serving you now. And I think that, in those situations, right, where you have a behavior that in a way has been serving you, but no longer is serving you, or an emotion that was serving you and is no longer serving you, it's great to like step back and ask yourself, okay, what purpose was this fulfilling?
Yeah.
And is there a healthier or a more loving way that I can do this? Is there a way that serves me better now that I can do this?
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Sarah, I'm curious for yourself on your own journey. Do you identify with the term self-love? Does that feel true for you, or is it more like self-acceptance, like self-care? Like, is there what feels true for you at this point?
I think to some extent it's all of them,
Mhm.
depending on the day.
Yeah.
you I mean, like I said earlier, I don't have the warm fuzzies for myself every day.
Mhm.
And so I think it can kind of run from a spectrum of, some days I'm frustrated with myself. Some days I feel appreciation for myself. Some days I am like, girl, you are amazing. And like everything in between.
Yeah.
Um, Now, in terms of self-care, I love that you mentioned self-care, because for me, regardless of how I'm feeling, right, whether I'm feeling frustrated with myself or super happy with myself or just accepting myself or appreciating myself or whatever, self-care for me is a constant that runs through all of that. So I think something that I've struggled with in the past, and I know is something that a lot of women struggle with, is this idea that you have to feel something first before you take action, right? So in my work, I see that a lot in terms of motivation, right? Well, I'm having trouble getting motivated to do this thing. And a lot of times what happens is if you do the action first, even if you don't feel like it, the feeling will follow.
Mhm.
Right. And so if you think about self care, I think about it very, very literally as taking care of yourself. Um, you know, Self care is non negotiable for me. And whether or not I'm feeling love for myself that day, I practice love for myself by taking care of myself.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Just like you said before with your son, he's 6. You're not always feeling all warm and fuzzy towards him. But just
Mhm.
because you're not, that doesn't mean that you don't show up for him as his mother and take care of him. And it doesn't mean that you wouldn't still sacrifice everything for him. Right. It's
Right.
you, they're not the same. Like you can,
Right.
the love is still
Right.
there, the care is still
And
there.
I'm not, yeah, and I'm not going to say to him, like, I'm not going to take care of you tonight
Right.
because you pissed me off.
Yeah.
Him acting one way or another does not change how worthy he is of my care.
Yes.
Right. And I think for a lot of women, and I'll speak just from my own experience, is that in the past, if I was happy with myself, I would reward myself. And if I was upset with myself, I would punish myself. And um and that didn't serve me.
Yeah.
It kept this cycle of self judgment going, and I constantly had to raise the bar on what is deserving of a reward.
Hmm.
Whereas regardless of how I'm feeling about myself now, I make it a point to practice self-care, because regardless of how I'm feeling about myself, I have decided that I am worthy of
Yeah.
my care.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So,
Mhm.
Sarah, I want to know, how has your journey to self love, self acceptance, self care, fill in the blank, how has this journey with yourself impacted your journey to entrepreneurship? Tell us about the connection between those two.
Ooh. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like parallel
Yeah.
paths that eventually don't become parallel, just merge.
Yeah.
Um, the body issues that I went through after I had my son, I saw a lot of women go through those body issues. And, they were coming to me working out, and I started to realize, like, okay, working out is part of the picture here, but it's not the whole picture here. You know, it, Part of it is nutrition. And so I went and got a nutrition certification. And I kind of had this idea in the back of my head, realizing that what these women really need is something holistic, right? Is something that helps them address the deeper stuff. Um, wouldn't it be cool if one day I could open up a practice where I do personal training and nutrition and combine that with my counseling background? And then I was just like, why am I sitting here thinking it's cool to, like, just do it? you know? And so what I do is I work specifically with women who are unhappy with their bodies and feel like weight loss is the answer. And this is the part, where you said at the beginning of the podcast, where when we were connected initially via email and you were looking at my site and everything, you were like, I don't know if this is the best match,
Yeah.
because it's really hard to mentally hold together these two separate ideas of self-love and weight loss,
Yes.
right? And so what I was seeing was kind of two things. So number one, we have normal fitness and diet culture on one side, which is sending the message of, in order to be worthy, in order to be beautiful, in order to be healthy, it means that you have to be thin. And then we had the body positivity movement on the other side, which I think is an absolutely wonderful thing. And the primary message there is you are absolutely worthy of love, no matter what your body looks like, no matter what size you are. And healthy can look like a lot of things. I am 1,000% down with all of that. However, there was a little bit of a shadow side with it, which is that a lot of my clients were coming to me saying, oh, I know I shouldn't want to lose weight. And so they're not only feeling the shame about how their bodies look and being unhappy with their bodies, but now they're feeling doubly ashamed because they feel like they shouldn't want to lose weight. And so my mission is really one of empowerment, but I want to give those women a safe space and say, it's okay to want whatever you want for yourself. Um, and the thing that I really, really work on is, you know, women come to me not loving their bodies, and they think that, oh, once I lose this weight, then I will love myself. And I try to turn that upside down, where what I advocate is take care of yourself, love yourself first, right? If you are loving yourself, if you are practicing self care, your body is going to naturally do what it needs to do. And for some people, that is weight loss. For some people, it's not. For some people, their body's like, nah, I'm good. And so ultimately, what I love to work on with my clients is helping them shift from ideas like, oh, I can't eat those cookies because they're going to make me fat, or I have to work out so I don't get fat, right? I want to shift away from those mindsets to, you know, I love cookies, but I don't want to eat them right now because they don't make me feel that great.
Yeah.
Or I really want to get out there and move my body because I know I feel really good when I do. And, so shifting from that idea of it centering around weight loss and body work to really what is going to help you feel and function your best.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I believe that self-care is doing those things that you need to do to make yourself feel and function your best.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do. And after we connected and we spoke the first time, that's when I was like, oh yes, I'm down with all of this. Because one thing that a lot of people don't know is that probably about a year or two ago, I was doing what you were doing. But at that
Mhm.
time, I was not yet in a space where I could hold space for
Mhm.
both, where I could articulate that well. And I had not yet come to terms with, the like the self-love piece. You don't need to change, like the body positivity, kind of like you're good as you are, and this idea of weight loss. And it was like a mismatch for me. Where I am
Mhm.
now, I am very much on board with everything that you're saying. 100%, because it's like it is your body and you can do what you like. But at the end of the day, it really is all about taking care of yourself and doing what feels good for you. And when you start from the inside out, which is your business, that is what you do.
Yes, hence the name. Yes.
It's a great name. But when you start from the inside out, that is like beautiful and nourishing and loving and kind and compassionate. And
Yeah.
if the body changes, cool. And if the body doesn't change, fine, right? It's not the sole focus, which I
It's
just love.
not the sole focus.
Yes.
Absolutely. There are so many ways to see progress. And, like the biggest victory, one of the biggest victories I had in my practice was when a client like called me because her parents used to punish her with exercise. They were like, well, if you didn't weigh so much, you wouldn't have to go walking. And she actually like called me one day and was like, I just worked out because I wanted to, because I knew it would feel good.
Hmm.
I had a client who had a ton of food anxiety, like, is this the right thing to eat? Oh my God, what am I doing? Who said, yeah, like you know, I had a really healthy lunch and dinner. I had some cookies. I'm good,
Yeah.
and she wasn't sweating it. She wasn't beating herself up. Like that is so powerful to me. It's
Hmm.
so cool to get to be a part of that journey. And I think, yeah, holding those two kind of seemingly contradictory ideas at once is such a challenge, right? Because I think, first of all, as humans, we are programmed to want to put things into boxes, right?
Yes.
To have these very clear, like black and white ideas. Um, and I think that one that is commonly out there is, well, if you want to lose weight, it must mean that you hate your body.
Hmm.
And something that I hear from a lot of my clients is, well, actually, I want to lose weight because I notice like I'm having some joint pain, or I notice that like my energy is down, and so there's so many factors that can play a role in that. Um, and I try to just send forth the idea that you can be both a masterpiece and a work in progress.
Yeah.
Like you can love yourself where you're at now, regardless of your size, regardless of your habits, and you can still want to make positive changes in your life.
Yes.
And it
Yeah.
doesn't mean like because you want to make positive changes, it doesn't mean that where you are now isn't good enough. It's more like, how can I continue to grow?
Yes. Yes. And on top of that, I would actually say that continuing to grow and having goals and having aspirations is an act of love. Because if you are not growing, you are stagnating or you're going in reverse, right? And
Yeah.
just like we can bring it back to your son, because I just think it's the perfect example with kids is like he is absolutely perfect and whole and amazing as he is. And next year he's going to be 7, and then he's going to be 8, and then he's going to be 9. And
Yeah.
if he was still at the same place as he was now when he's 6, you would not be, that's not a loving thing. That's not a caring thing, that you are not helping him grow. Like that is part of what you
Right.
do. So we need to do that for ourselves.
I absolutely love, 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 love that you thought about it that way.
Yeah.
Like that is so perfect. Yes, like I absolutely enjoy and love my son where he is in this stage of growth right now. But I can't wait to see like the person that he turns into too.
Right.
I remember I had a friend ask me once, "Are you the same person that you were 2 years ago?" I was like, "What an odd question." I was like, "Of course not." Of course not.
Yeah.
And he seemed like really shocked by that. And I was like, why would I want to be? Like, not that there was anything wrong with me, but my goodness, like there's so much to learn. There's so there's so much like growing to do,
Yeah.
you know, being in right relationship with myself. I'm getting closer and closer and closer every day. And it's such a process. And I think it's so imperative to really be able to hold those two ideas together, that you can love yourself where you're at and you can still want to make positive change, and that's okay.
Yes. Yes. And that is okay. Definitely. Sarah, if there's somebody listening who is maybe at this point in their journey where they're maybe on the cusp of like taking action, whether that's, joining a program, hiring a coach, whether it's just within themselves making a decision, if they're
Mhm.
sort of like on the fence about doing something, is there like a practice or an exercise or something that you would recommend that they start with on this journey within themselves?
Yeah, so I think the exercise that I would recommend is actually the one that my therapist had me do,
Mm,
because it is so powerful and gives so much clarity. Um, so you may have listened to this a couple times for your listeners to write this down, but there are essentially six inner children: shame, fear, I know I'm going to forget one, rage, depression, control, and hurt. I got them.
you got
It's
it.
like a miracle that I got them all in one. I remembered them all at once. Um, but those are the six children, right?
Mhm.
And so when you're feeling something, you want to give voice to each of those children, right? And so the hurt child is the one that's like, you let me down, or I
Mm,
let myself down. It's the one that like feels excluded, things like that. Rage or anger is usually covering for fear, shame, or hurt.
mhm.
So when you feel that anger and you're like, oh my God, I'm such an angry person, I shouldn't be that way, be like, hey, anger, thank you for protecting me from feeling these other unpleasant things that I didn't want to feel. Shame is a really interesting one, because I think, we want to hide from shame a lot. It's an extremely uncomfortable emotion to feel, but it's also really valuable, right? Because what shame does is it gives us a signal that our values and our actions are not necessarily aligned.
Mm,
Now, what's important to consider is, what values are you holding to that, and where do those values come from? Are they truly yours, or are they imposed somewhere from the outside? Right? Shame is also that voice of, I'm not good enough. Um, Control is the one that's worried about how we appear outwardly, whether it's physically or emotionally. Um, Depression, I think, is pretty self-explanatory, and I think
mhm.
fear is pretty self-explanatory as well. But basically, what you do is, whenever you're feeling not great, go through and give those inner children voice. And I like to write it down. I'm not a big journaling person, but I feel like for this exercise, journaling is extremely helpful. You need to get it out of your head. So either journal it, or you can like talk into a recorder. Um, but yeah, you want to give each of those children voice. And then you have your head of household, which is your inner parent, the loving parent. And what you do is, after each of your children have a voice, right, then you talk to them from the perspective of the head of household, and you take care of them. And so I'll give an example, because this is really challenging for people. So let's take anger, right? And anger could be like, I am so mad at her. I can't believe she said that to me. I am never speaking to her again. And head of household could be like, hey, anger, like, I hear you. I can tell like you're running really strong right now. Thank you so much for protecting me. I know that's why you're here, but anger, I think I'm okay. Like, I don't need to be protected right now, you know? So thank you so much for serving me. Let's take it down a notch a little bit. And I think you helped, and now I'm good. And rather than being like, no, anger, you need to be quiet, you shouldn't feel it. So,
Yeah.
What you want to do when you're responding from the point of view of the head of household is, number one, you want to validate and thank your emotion for being there and for performing its service to you. And then you also want to take action, right? So asking anger, okay, you're good now. I'm ready to move on. You could say something like, anger, I appreciate it. I'm not going to let you run the show. Things like that. So, kind of how you would talk to lovingly to a child when they're in a tantrum or something,
Yeah.
and say, hey, like, you are totally allowed to feel that. That's cool. But, hitting me is not okay. Or
Right.
something like that,
Yeah.
is finding that space of validation and also moving toward positive change.
Yeah. Yeah. And that I love the sound of that exercise. It sounds so empowering as you're speaking about it, right? Because I think sometimes, especially when we're having really big emotions, I think especially about ourselves on the inside, there's usually a lot of shame around that. But
Hmm.
it's just like we don't always even know what they are, and they can, at least I know for myself, they can. There's back and forth, and there's swirling, and it's like you don't actually know who is who and like who's running the show, and you can kind of feel there's like this chaos inside of you, and
Yeah.
that exercise gets all of that out, and then you get to respond as the adult you are, not as one of those
Yes.
children. Yeah.
Yeah, you give voice to all of that chaos inside of you.
Yeah.
You separate it, you kind of crystallize it and get clear, and then you take care of it. And that exercise, I truly believe, is like just one of the greatest acts of self-love that you can perform, because you are literally like loving all the hard stuff.
Right. Right. Yes. Yes. Okay, Sarah, I'm just conscious of our time as we are getting ready to wrap up here. Um, if is there anything else that you would like to add? Is there anything else on your heart? Is there any other little bits of wisdom that you'd like to share? I just want to put it out there if there's anything else that you'd like to say.
Yeah, I think just one thing that I would add is I work a lot in the realm of habits and stress management and things like that. And I think that for, people who are listening to this who may feel like they are ready to start making positive changes, the message I want to send is, take your time, please. Um, a lot of people, because the things that we want to change, right, are so uncomfortable inside of us that we often want to just like rip off the band-aid and overhaul everything really fast, and that's why, again, in the perspective of my work, that's why there are a lot of those like crash diets and 30-day shreds and all of those things, because it gives us that immediate comfort of having done something. And the problem is that kind of change does not last. And so, what I would really encourage listeners to do who are feeling like, okay, I want to make a change, I don't know where to start, and I don't know how to do it, is think about what is making you most uncomfortable right now, or what is the hardest thing for you right now. Take some time to write down where you are, where you want to be, and in the world of like what you want to be, really think about, what does that look like? What are you doing? How are you feeling? All of those things. And then take just one little step to get there, just one. And then when you've mastered that one little step, when that feels easy for you, then take the next step, right? Because what happens is, when we try to overhaul everything at once, there's no way that's sustainable. And so what happens is, a couple weeks later, we give up, and then it feeds that narrative that we have of, oh, I'm not disciplined, I can't control myself, I can't do this, I'm going to be stuck this way. Whereas if you just take it one small change at a time, yes, it takes longer, but it's going to last, and you're going to feel amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. That's beautiful advice. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So I think we will leave it there. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on and joining me and sharing your story, sharing a little bit about your work. I believe in what you're doing and the mission that you're on, and I really just appreciate you sharing it with us.
Thank you so much.